Welcome to the Writing Black Joy podcast, where we celebrate the joyful narratives of the Black creatives writing their names on the pages of history and on our hearts. I am your host, Sophia Robinson. Here, you'll find conversations with amazing Black creatives, learn more about their projects and the joy that they're bringing into the world, find inspiration for your own creative ventures, and dive deep into the topics that shape our narratives. The guests on this podcast are all sorts of creatives, from writers of fiction and nonfiction to playwrights and actors, visual artists, podcasters, and so much more who are bringing joy to their narratives. So, if you are a writer, a creative, or a lover of the arts, or you simply want to hear some good conversations, keep on listening and welcome to the show. Welcome back to Writing Black Joy. Thank you so much for joining me here, for tuning in this week, and for being my co-creators on this journey. If you have not already done so, or if this is your first time listening, hit subscribe so that you don't miss an episode and share it with a friend, especially those friends of yours whose love language is receiving podcast recommendations. I know mine is. And speaking of sharing, this week's guest, Keshia Sakarah, wrote an incredible book called Caribe that I cannot wait to share with you. It's full of recipes from all around the Caribbean, as well as the history associated with these recipes and with the islands they come from. So you can imagine what fun I had chatting with a fellow sister from the Caribbean who loves food and stories. First, a bit about Keshia. Keshia Sakarah is a food writer, recipe creator, and a former chef patron of Caribe Caribbean Eating in Brixton. Raised in Leicester with a Montserratian and Barbudan heritage, she developed a love of cooking from a young age. Named one of Code's 100 influential women in food in 2021 and 2022, Keshia has contributed to publications like Waitrose Weekend, Guardian Feast, and Good Food. Keshia has appeared on BBC Radio 4's Woman's Hour, Good Food, Tastemade, Twisted, and Masterchef The Professionals. Caribe is her first book. One of the things I love about this podcast is that every time I record a season, I find that themes emerge. And one that has come through loud and clear in this season is truth. And there's nothing truer than food. You know, I'm somebody who loves ideas and ideation and staying in that imagination headspace, but food is down to earth. And to me, it's just one of those true things that we need in life. It's good for our body and it's good for our souls, right? And so I love the truths that come through in this conversation as Keshia and I talk about her inspiration to create the cookbook laced with history, to record wisdom from her elders, and begin to showcase her experiences and those of others through food. How she built an unconventional cooking career, how ingredients can bring us more than just nourishment, the connection between food and the stories of the people who cook and eat it, the dishes she loves to cook, how she defines home, how ideas around creating that sense of home led her to create the book, how she researched the recipes and the history from the other islands, her process of creating and organizing the book, and so much more. I hope that you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Welcome to Writing Black Joy, Keshia. I have been excited about this conversation for a while, so I'm so happy to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Excellent, excellent. So, as you would have heard in the intro, Keshia has combined my favorite things, writing, cooking, and Caribbean food. And it's like heavenly to see those things all come together. So let's just jump in. You have your new book called Caribe, which features recipes and history from all over the Caribbean, as well as a bit of your own history about being a chef and all of those details. What inspired you to create it?
I think to what you said, all of the things that you like to be put into one thing. I love cooking. I love learning, and I'm very curious about like the why of something, how things work, what puts them together. And I just found, as I was working my own way through the food space, that the representation or like the Caribbean food I was seeing outwardly didn't fully reflect the experience I was having in real life, i.e. through the community part of through my friends. Like my friends are from Trinidad, my family's partly Bayesian as well. So I was getting some of these references, but I wasn't seeing it in that wider food space. So I just felt like there was a lot more to talk about, a lot more to share. And a lot of our history just isn't recorded. So having many of my elders, like grandparents, no longer here, I just thought they used to impart a lot of knowledge onto me when I was younger, even if I didn't ask for it. So I need to be intentional about recording this somewhere.
Yeah, and that is so true. I think when you're growing up, your parents and your grandparents tell you stuff, you're like, oh, seriously? But then
Right.
when I got a bit older, and I mean, my parents passed away when I was quite young. So now that I'm a bit older and I would love to be having those conversations, I I find it a bit harder to piece together. So I
Mm.
love the idea of recording it in a place where, to me, it almost felt like looking through it, almost felt like sitting in my grandmother's kitchen because you had that combination of the conversations and the food and everything. So I love that sort of combo.
Nice. I love that.
Um, yeah. And of course, you talk about that oral history and the importance in your family. You actually talked about that in the introduction of the book. And I think this is common throughout the diaspora. So I'm curious, did that even influence you as a chef or influence you into becoming a chef?
Yeah, I think it did unintentionally again. As I
Mm.
say in the intro, like a lot of my life growing up in my younger years was centered around food, but not on purpose. It's just because I'm an only child. So when my mum was at work, I would be with my grandparents. They were retired. And the things that they did in their spare time were food related. So they would go to their allotment. My grandma lived at the market and she just used to cook and bake at home all the time. So I was just exposed to all of this. And again, it just exposed me to so much of these cultural things that they retained from being here since the 1950s until in the
Mm.
90s I was born. And it just like planted all of these seeds. So I think by the time I was at an age where I was like exploring what I wanted to do as a career, I already had this love for this thing. And that's why the first part of the intro is called Mom, I Want to Be a Chef, is because I
Mm.
then got to this point. I really enjoy this thing, but through representation, so to speak, we weren't seeing many African or Caribbean chefs on TV. So it wasn't necessarily deemed as a realistic career choice. But
Mhm.
fortunately, I just pushed through and managed to make it work somehow.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I'm curious, I think you mentioned a bit of it again, but like, did you find there was any, let's just say, pushback to becoming a chef or exploring this career?
Um, yeah, in the sense that it's unfortunate because I think when you do live in the West, in the UK, in the US, often, we experience discrimination in many ways. So we don't always
Hmm.
realize that it's happening. I do know that it's taking me a long time to get here in possibly in comparison to others. Do you know what I mean? And so, yeah, in that pushback. And then in terms of my family, like I say, my
Hmm.
mom and my grandma as well, they didn't really get this whole idea of working in food. That wasn't seen as a career. And as you know, when you are of a quote unquote immigrant family or you are of the diaspora, when you move to a different country, you go there to make money, to
Yeah.
make your life well. So the thought king and being paid was not on the list. It was a doctor, a
Mm.
lawyer, any, like high paying academic role. And I've always been creative. So I just couldn't force
Mm.
it, to be honest.
Mm. And that's so interesting because I think a lot of that exists even in the Caribbean, especially among certain sectors. And like cooking is, and I always find it so interesting because, cooking to me, when I was growing up, cooking was like, it's woman's work in the house, right? You're cooking at
Mhm.
home, your family. When I turn on the TV and I see the chefs, most of them are male. And I always
Mhm.
found that such a divide, like a bit odd to see. Okay, so I guess if women are doing it, it has to be in the house and they have to be for their family, but men can be the ones to go out and do it and earn money. So um, that is something that's always often crossed my mind before when I used to watch a lot more food TV.
Mhm.
And so I'm glad you were able to break out and do the thing that you wanted to do. We'll get into your process around creating the book and everything later, but I know obviously prior to doing this book, you have had and continue to have a career as a chef. So what did that look like coming through the ranks?
Well, interestingly, I didn't get to hear career-wise doing it the conventional way. And I think a part of that is because of the things you mentioned. Like I felt the barriers of being a woman as well, never mind a Caribbean woman in the food space. And I think that really put me off. So my way of working around that was just doing stuff myself. So after I finished uni and then did a master's, I started doing street food a little bit just to play around with that. And then moving to London, I got into like the pop-up scene and did residencies and stuff like that. And that just allowed me to kind of cook on my own terms, basically, and trial out different things, engage with different audiences. And then all of that evolved into me having my space in Brixton, which I had for 2.5 years, which was such a great experience and learning curve and opportunity. And it kind of set me up for this book because it exposed me into like the food world and the food community in London, but also to be able to be a bit more of a voice and to be someone who has stuff to say, so to speak. So all of those threads, even though I wasn't in kitchens directly, I was kind of like running this parallel line, even though it wasn't very straight, alongside that food scene until I got to here, basically.
That's great. And do you still do a lot of those pop-ups and things now, or is your focus more on the recipe side of things?
I think in the last couple of years, because of the latter part of the book process where it's been so heavy on the writing and the developing the rest in that sense, I do miss cooking in the kitchen. But I think having tried lots of different things, I know the type of kitchen cooking I liked. And I love doing a little pop-up. You can go for a few months or a few weeks, whatever. You can enter into a new space, build a lovely vibe, and then you move on to the next thing, and it just stays interesting and new. And then alongside that, I teach now. So I teach at a cooking school in Hackney, and I do a lot of work with this charity called Food Behind Bars. And we go into prisons and do different cooking workshops and recipe developments and menus, because oftentimes the food in prison doesn't represent or reflect the demographic in prison. And obviously diet is important regardless of where you are. So that's really interesting because it's a total different thread in the food space.
Completely. I do have some questions about that. So depending on how the timing goes, I'm going to come back to that because I'm quite interested in hearing more about that. I know your cooking brings you a lot of joy. And as you're aware, the podcast is called Writing Black Joy. And it is really about creating from that joyful place. Why is that important to you?
I just think ingredients have so much in them beyond the sustenance that they have for us. And I get excited about that. So I love to impart that on others. And I've realized now I've been able to do that in so many different forms. So through the book, it's through an anthological perspective and it's informative. And at the school, it's a very inspirational perspective because I'm teaching children of primary school age. So I just love that food. Like when I go to the market, and this takes me back to my childhood, I immediately are just drawn to the colors, and that still happens till this day. Like I'll go to Brixton Market tomorrow and get excited if there's callaloo there, and I'll just see it in its fullness and it just makes me happy. So I think it's just the fact that I know that these things will eventually become something that we can eat, and it's nourishing and it makes us feel good. And that process, whilst it can be hard sometimes, it's a very enjoyable one. So I just love what it does to us. I love where we get it from, the fact that it has a journey, it has to grow and all of that. It just makes me feel nice. But then that's all I can say on that.
I like that. I'm like that too. I used to go in Barbados, there's a market called Cheapside Market. And I used to go there on a Saturday morning. And it was just like the colors and the ingredients. Some of them I didn't even know what to do with. But if you ask the person who was selling it or who grew it, they'd always have a little recipe for you or a little suggestion. And I like that. I like that's how food builds a conversation as much as something to eat. So yeah, I definitely think that is, I can definitely resonate with that completely. What do you see as the connection between food and stories? Because obviously you've written a book about food and you've done so much storytelling in there about the different islands and stuff like that. What do you see as the connection between the food and the story? I know you said earlier, food carries so much more with it, but I'd love to dive into that a bit more.
So it preserved. First, it just has so much in it that I think a lot of times we don't realize, just as much as we look to music and fashion, and it tells us a lot about communities and their experience. I think sometimes food gets forgotten in that sense, and why is integral is because it preserves so much. It preserves what's happening with people, time and place. A great example I love to give about that is saltfish, for example. Like saltfish and saltfish has been imported to the Caribbean now for a good 300-400 years, if not longer, actually. But yet it's so fundamental to how we eat, what we eat, and we absolutely love it. Like it's clearly not going to stop regardless of where we are in our independence and all of that nowadays. And so whilst we still eat this food till this day, there's a reason why it got there. And then that tells us so much about the history and about our past. So I just love that it carries culture and heritage, especially when we, are of the diaspora, for example. We're not in our native environment, so we don't have like cues to remind us of who we are in terms of our identity. Those things kind of constantly reinforce that indirectly. And linking back to that saltfish example, I remember in my grandparents' house when I'd arrive after school and I could smell the saltfish being boiled, and just reference alone reminded me that this is a Montserratian household, you know what I mean, or Barbudan on my other side. So it's just those little things that it's able to hold without saying anything, basically.
Yeah, I love that. One of the other things I love, and I've learned this through having friends from the other parts of the Caribbean and also from other parts of the world. Like I have a really good friend who is Nigerian, and just like seeing all of the connections. Years ago, I was living in Tanzania, and I was working with a charity there, and they had this dish that's really similar to cuckoo. The cuckoo that we have in Barbados. It was really similar. And I was like, what is how crazy is this? I'm like all the way around the world in a place that I felt even like half familiar and half strange. And then somebody puts this dish down in front of me, and I'm like, oh, this is familiar. There's something familiar about this. And so I love all of those connections between some of the foods from different islands. You talk about saltfish, and like I have some European friends who use saltfish for completely different things. And so it's nice coming together and talking about the common threads that come through those recipes. So that I really like. What's your favorite thing to cook? Or one of your favorite things if you're like, I don't have favorites. So what's one of your favorite things to cook?
Yeah, I don't have favorites either. I'm really terrible. I just like, that's what it is. Depends on how I'm feeling. Because I love the process of making it as well. I really love to make roti. Especially when it's just buttered off and it's just obviously so fatty, but just so comforting. And also it's bread, it's carby, it's just really, it's soothing to use. I love, and also a good soup.
Yeah.
A really good soup. Yes.
Yeah.
Like all the hot veg and hard food as well.
I love that. I do love to eat roti, but I've never figured out how to make a good roti. And I've been to different cooking classes. Like when I lived in Barbados, this was one of my goals was to try to figure out how to make good roti, because I had a really good friend who makes a nice roti, but I could not I couldn't perfect it. And so I've kind of given up, which is a shame, because now that I'm in the UK, anybody coming to make me no roti. So I got to just go without. But
go to London.
Yeah, I will have to do that. And the other thing is in Barbados, we eat roti different to I have a really good friend who's Trinidadian, and she's always like, I don't understand how y'all eat roti like that. And I'm like, I don't understand how you eat. So it's just even how it's eaten in different ways. But I need a trip to London and get some roti when I start to Jones for a little bit. But that's good. Personally, I like to bake. I love baking more than cooking for a million reasons. So that is what I love to do. That's what relaxes me and calms me and stuff like that. Cooking to me is more, as much as I love to see the ingredients and everything, the actual cooking process is more out of necessity to me. Baking is love it, very relaxing. So I identify with that roti making, even though I can't make a roti. So that is fine. One of the questions I want to ask you about, because obviously you speak about being in the diaspora and those connections with food, is that idea around home. It's something that I've thought about for a long time. So obviously there was a Caribbean migration over to the UK, as you said, in the 50s, 60s. Within my family, my aunt came to the UK, but my father went to North America. He went to Canada. So I was born actually in Curacao. Then I lived in Canada for a bit. Then I moved to Barbados. And since then I've lived so many places, the UK, as I said, I've lived in Tanzania for a bit. And I often think about home and what it means and creating that sense of home if you're in a place where you feel like you're a bit disconnected.
Mm.
So tell me a bit about your sort of relationship with the ideas around home and how you create that for yourself.
I'm constantly redefining that to myself as I get older. I was born and raised in Leicester City, which is a tiny city, not tiny, but it's small in the Midlands. Very small Caribbean community. But I've traveled a lot since I was a young age, just like you have. And even though I didn't live in these places, I was exposed quite early. And I think because of that, and then also like my mum was very intentional in terms of like putting me in very cultural settings. So like my after school club was in Caribbean Centre in Leicester and stuff like that. It really broadened my awareness of like the layers and the parts of myself, even though we were here. So as I've gotten older, I do toy with, even when it comes to like defining my heritage, like really, what am I? And I think, so how that twins into home is that at the moment, home is wherever my mum is because that's my family. But at the same time, I feel like home is where I feel the most comfortable, the most safe and the most relaxed. And in recent years, that's been whenever I go to the Caribbean, in all honesty. Like, because like I say, my cousin is part Bayesian, so we go to Barbados quite a bit, and I feel a sense of it there. I went to Trinidad for the first time since 2017, and ever since I've been back, I love being there. So I just feel like it's where I feel real connection around me, and yeah, it's not here.
Yeah, and that's understandable. Do you have ways of trying to create those feelings? Even, whether you're in London, because I know obviously, like you say, you go back to Leicester quite a bit, but when you're not there, how do you sort of create that? Does food come into that as well? Or like, how else do you create that for yourself?
Almost and that's the thing, I think when you are of the diaspora, you have to be so intentional in terms of recreating that sense of home by the things that you do and the things that you're around. So whether it's the food that I eat, where I live, so being able to be in close proximity to a market where I can get the ingredients that I like plantain and blah, blah, blah. Being a part of carnival, whilst that is just an element of our culture, in the UK, it's a big representation for our community. So being engaged with that allows that connection. So it's almost like when we're here, we have to go about it in a bit of a up and down way, so to speak. But it also allows to recreate that sense of home in any way that you can.
Yeah, I love that. Let's talk a bit about your book, because that is how I came to find you. So let's talk a little bit about that. So what inspired you to create a book? And I wouldn't even call it a recipe book, because I feel like there's so much more than recipes here.
I think actually carrying on from that sense of that conversation about home and that question about home, I think it was just creating something that I know could allow other people to feel a sense of home here. Because there's so much context in it that even I learned when I was putting it together that just really helped me again to really connect deeply and redefine how I see myself in where we are. And I think, again, food wouldn't be that direct vessel that you would think of, but yet there's so much information that it just allowed me to tap into it easily. So I just wanted to create something that we could really connect with as a community. But not only that, really archived a lot of our history that hasn't been done in a way that we can really relate to and resonate with. Also, because a lot of our history is shared orally. So some of the recipes that are from my elders, I recreated through taste, because they would never tell me when I asked them, and they'd never written them down anyway, and now they're not here. Know that culturally, in order for us to be our identities to be preserved, because my family is on its 4th generation in this country now, and my grandparents aren't here, so that younger generation won't have that direct experience with them like I did. So things like this can really allow us to understand exactly who we are on all levels.
Yeah, I love that. My best friend, we grew up together in Barbados, and she's moved to the States. I came here to the UK, and I remember years later, she went back to her grandmother to try to get some of those recipes from her. And she had to like follow her around the kitchen And
Literally.
right, because her grandma didn't really have the recipes written
No.
down. So she literally had to follow her on the kitchen right stuff that when I tried that with my grandmother was just wouldn't
Same.
do it. She just wouldn't do it.
Wouldn't entertain me.
Not at all. So a lot of the recipes that I feel like it took me a long time to like, one of them is coconut bread, which I love, but I only ever loved my grandmother's coconut bread. Others were like, okay, but like this one was,
Yeah.
perfect to me. And it took me a long time to get to a recipe that I feel like, okay, this tastes like the coconut bread I remember when my grandmother used to make it. And I then got it down to one loaf because she never made a loaf for anything. Like she would make like
Yeah.
5 or loaves of one loaf.
Yeah.
Well, I had to then get the recipe down so that I could make one. So I felt quite impressed with myself for doing that because she wasn't giving that up. But I love how you've gone through and tested and managed to get those recipes from your own heritage. Tell me a bit about the process of collecting the recipes from the other islands, because obviously you've got a lot of representation here from different islands around the Caribbean. So what was the process like of collecting those recipes?
I just spoke to people that I knew from those islands and looked at older cookbooks and like kind of used that as a research to see how are these ingredients used, how are they cooked, and so on. Some of them I've tasted, some of them I hadn't. So in that sense, I really have to be clear that a good part of this is from a very anthropological perspective because it's not my direct experience. And obviously it's so broad for that just to be one person's experience, but it's as close to as possible if it isn't 100%. But equally, because the motivation was to get as much of this together to celebrate the region in one place, in one space, in one book, I was just determined some way, somehow to get something there. For example, Barbados' national dish, flying fish cooking. When we did that, I mean, I've made cooking many times myself. The flying fish and the sauce that went with it, I asked my auntie a few times. She didn't give me a straight answer. So I did the best with what I could and asked people, right? Classic. But
Listen, classic.
I couldn't get flying fish. There's one spot in South London that sells flying fish. And of course, the day I went to get it, they didn't have any. So it's just little things like that. It may not be the exact ingredient that is traditionally used, but it's as close as, and it's kind of gives a really good celebration of the dish anyway.
Yeah. Among the things I find often differentiates, because some of the islands have similar versions of a dish, right? So I think about cuckoo, and I know I have a really good friend who's Jamaican, and they have a slightly different version. They don't call it cuckoo, they call it something else, which I don't remember right now.
We call it fungi in Barbuda, and we add peas instead of okra. And I know some islands don't put anything in; they just do the corn can by itself.
Yes, turned by itself. And think one of them does coconut milk. So I know throughout the island they have. I think that might be Jamaica actually.
Actually, no. Sorry to cut you. When I was in Grenada, they did Creole fish and cuckoo, but they added coconut milk to the cuckoo. Yeah.
Ah, okay, it's Grenada. I knew one of them did the coconut milk. And so I've always found that interesting, but I also find sometimes what differentiates the taste between the islands is the different herbs and stuff like that. And I find like I just came up from Barbados a few days ago. I have a friend up there who makes different preserves of that. You should make the biggest jar of seasoning you have, and I'll bring back that seasoning because I find it hard sometimes to find some of those herbs and those combinations. And to me, that's what makes my chicken or whatever taste
definitely
to be how, it would taste at home. So it's always things like that I feel like make the difference.
Yeah. And also it's impossible to, we have so many islands in one space. And I think that's another cool thing about this is that it kind of shows you how similar we are, but how different we are at the same time. And whilst, we all may have some type of hot pepper, it might not be a Scotch bonnet, it may be known by something else. Seasoning pepper, which is same taste but no heat. Some call it pimento, some call it seasoning peppers, and that's just that. But still, the way in which we use it, what dishes we use it, and how is what makes us all individual at the same time. And I did find that through that process, certain things were repeating themselves. And actually, that informed how we broke up the book because I knew that I wanted it to show each island by themselves in some way, but equally, it got to a point, I think, when we're doing the desserts, that how could I put cassava pone in Antigua when I know I've had it in Barbados and I've had it elsewhere, and I don't want no one to be upset. So I thought, okay, this is where we go back into the style of a traditional cookbook where you'll find all of these in the sweet section. And I think actually added the perfect balance, because a lot of the savory, the mains and so on were island specific relatively, even though some do cross over. But with the sweets, pretty much we all share the same ones anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I don't want to start an argument now.
Yeah. Well, let me not open that can of worms. I'll leave that alone.
Very smart, because I would say pone is mine. So
see, there you go. I know our people say. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, but no, I too am joking. It's absolutely fine. So you talked a little bit about thinking about the layout of the book. So tell us a bit more about that, the actual writing and creating a book process. Have you done anything like that before, and how did you find it?
I never published anything before, so this is my debut. Leading up to this, I had written a few recipes for publications, and that's when I was just like, actually, beyond this cooking thing, I have lots to say just in general about food. And so I thought, okay, there's something here. So as we well know, like, publishing is very white and middle class, and there's not a lot of us in there. It wasn't like I could just go ask somebody, how do I do this? I legitimately had to Google example of a proposal, because they just don't exist like that, the format alone. But prior to that, I had to get an agent, and then they have to want to work with you and believe that this is a great idea, and then they can submit you to a publisher. The reason why it took so long is because I was actually declined the first time, so I had to go again. But I was just determined not to let this document, which is probably about 100 pages at that point, sit in my Google Drive drying up. So I was just like, I'm going to do this. So once we got into the creative process, and I have a lovely editor who made the difference like night and day, because she was so like invested and encouraging of this idea and believed the necessity of it to allow me to just be as creative as possible. So when it came to putting together the format and so on, I knew that, like I said, I wanted each island to have its own shine. The reason why Haiti is at the beginning, for example, is because Haiti won the revolution and is so integral to our history. There was no way it could just go in the middle. And the first recipe is soup jamu, because that's their independent soup. And again, I just thought, if you're opening the book and that's the first recipe that you see and that's the first thing you read, like, I feel like that not only sets the tone, but it just lets you know like what this is about and what we're here for. And just to be quite like direct and honest, but respectful and humble in such a sensitive way. And then the rest, I think they just came from my own experiences of travel and people that I know. Like, I love Trinidad, hence why, and also Trinidad's food is so vast, hence why that's the biggest chapter, to be quite honest with you.
Absolutely.
No shade to anybody else.
No.
The Spanish Caribbean kind of at the beginning, simply because so Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Dominican Republic, is because the Dominican Republic and Haiti are one island, which most people don't realize. So actually, the Dominican Republic had to go after Haiti, and then we kind of just went into this thread of the Spanish Caribbean. And then, the rest just kind of slotted in as the creative process just evolved.
Okay, I love that. And then in terms of the research, how long did that take? Because you said it took a while. So how long did that research process take? And how did you do it?
So I'd done bits before I had got the deal, but following that, a good 2.5 years. And like I said, I just read a lot of old cookbooks from that have been written about Caribbean cooking from various parts of the Caribbean as well. And I read lots and lots and lots journals about our history, because I just felt like they approached it in quite a detailed and kind of, when I say heavy, I didn't mind that, because I wanted as much context as possible to then be able to break it down in a way that fit this. So my mind pulled like 100%, but then I took out the 20% I needed for this, because obviously it is still a cookbook. So just lots and lots of reading. Lots of reading. I listened to some podcasts and just different conversations about our food and identity and stuff like that. And then a lot of it as well was informed by my travels and just by having conversations with people, because again, our history is oral. And I just found, especially when I was traveling around the Caribbean doing the photography for this 2 years ago, I just found that, like you say, you go to a market, you ask someone, so how do I cook this yam? What do I do with it? And then they will just go into a story. And I just found in those moments, there was so much information that was just there that I wouldn't find anywhere else. So for me, that was kind of like the best part of it, because it was firsthand, it was organic, and it was honest.
Yeah, I love that. And I do like, as I said, going to the market and asking questions. And you do get some really interesting stories that just even go beyond the ingredient. Is there anything that you found difficult about the process of putting a book together, given that you said you hadn't done anything like that before? Like, what were some things that you feel like made it, you were difficult, but that you were able to overcome, obviously, because you have that age?
I would say a few things. I think, again, which kind of confirms why I've done this, and then thank God that I have. There's so much of our history that isn't recorded. So when you're trying to find it, it's so difficult. And it might be different if I was in the islands, for sure, because I think so much is preserved, and therefore it's there to be accessed by speaking to an elder or going to archives and stuff like that. But here I did find that difficult. So yeah, a lot of our history isn't recorded, so it made it quite difficult, just like being able to search certain things from being here. Also, publishing is a very funny industry. And I think, I'm very fortunate to have been able to publish this now. In the last few years, there's been quite a few chefs of Caribbean heritage in the UK that have been published, and that's great. And I really do hope that frequency continues. But I know that previously it has been a little lacking. So I do hope. So as a result of that, when you're presenting ideas and wanting to be commissioned, it makes it extra hard, because there isn't many other examples for people to see and actually invest in your idea and your concept. And that's why it took me two rounds to actually be successful. So I think that's another factor that made the journey longer and more difficult.
Yeah. And I think it's also important, as you said, to be able to have resilience in those moments, because at the end of the day, I know so many people who have ideas, who want to put a book out into the world, and I think it's such a big achievement to actually do that. And so I'm really glad that you were able to do that with your sort of creative idea. What was your proudest moment during the process?
I don't think there's one, just like favorites. There isn't one. There's a few. I think
we can have a few.
When we was in Montserrat 2 years ago now, actually, and we were at St. Patrick's. I was there with my cousins, and I had the deal was already on the tables, and that was when I was doing travel trips. So I was being very mindful of things I wanted to photograph. And one of the photographs we used was a picture of us at St. Patrick's Day with green paint all over us, eating the goat water. And I was presence of mind at that time to know I wanted it then, and I managed to use the picture as well from a phone. That was very special. Because,
nice.
Yeah, I just think that was special because I feel like it signified, again, so much in one picture. And I felt like by doing that, I was representing, and not from a tick boxy space at all, because I think representation gets used in a funny way sometimes, but really like going in our wholeness and communicating that to the world. When I was on the food shoot and my mom and some of my family came through, that was really nice, because again, it was like just having my two worlds collide a little bit. And when your ideas and your things that you're just thinking of are coming to life, and then you're actually present in it, was just wild, honestly.
So that was, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just the fact that it's done, to be honest with you, I'm just in awe of it. I'm very proud of it. And it's beyond me now. It lived past me. I just brought it to life, and I was just the vessel for it. But I just really hope that, like, actually, I've had so many messages so far from people who have actually said how much they appreciate that this was written in this way. and how they've been able to identify and connect with certain things just within them, just through reading this. I never expected that. And when I've read them, it's brought a tear to my eye because, again, it's just that power of food and how it can bring you joy in ways that you don't realize. And that was just a thing, to be honest.
Yeah, I love that. And what are you cooking up next? No pun intended.
I want to, I'm loving this. I never realized this was happening when I was doing it, but I just tapping into this real sense of anthropology and exploring people and place through food is so powerful. And I think oftentimes in the cookery space anyway, food is approached from like a celebratory way. And what can I cook for this dinner party? And But that's not the case for everybody in the world. A lot of people we all eat for very different reasons. And I think there's so much in food, as we said. And I just look forward to tapping into that more for the African diaspora and so on.
I love that. I can't wait to hear more about that. What advice would you give a budding creator?
It's very hard to be an artist in any form or vessel, because your creativity is yours, and then you have to have the balls and the gall almost to like put it out there. But I also believe it's also your superpower. You have to, because you just never know how it's going to resonate with people, and you just never know how much it can also change your life and your experience. So I think just keep being creative. Just keep being creative, keep evolving, keep trying new things, keep doing stuff that inspires your work to take on many different forms. And you just never know how it's going to hit and how it's going to land. And I think when you're operating from that space and stay authentic, it will always win.
Yeah, I definitely love that. So just a couple more things now. I do have a lightning round, so we're going to just dive into that. And then we have a last couple of questions for you. So with a lightning round, I usually just set like a 5-minute timer. I just have a list of questions, rapid fire, just, add to them any way you like. So let us begin. What is bringing you joy right now?
The sun and my cats. Yeah.
The sun in the UK, always bringing joy. I tell you, I'm loving it. What's something you want to try for fun?
Oh, something I want to try for. I'm not confident yet, but I'd love to see, when people are roller skating in the street on the 4 wheels. I can do the blade, but the 4 wheels, I'm quite scared, but I do want to try it because they look so dope when they do it.
Oh, nice. I look forward to seeing the success of that. What returns you to joy if you're not sort of in a great place or in a good mood, let's say?
Eating something nice, usually fried.
I'm so glad you said that, because I feel the same way. Yeah. That's great. What is something that always makes you laugh?
What makes you laugh? A good sense of, obviously, a good sense of humor. Just someone who has is just quite smart and dry and quick-witted. Because I can be like that. So I like to get that from people, and I like to giggle. So yeah.
That's fantastic. What is something that you dread but always feels good afterwards?
Public speaking.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. I have not had that answer before. So that's very interesting. And what is something that you're dreaming about?
Going on a plane to the sun.
Yes, that sounds good. Where's the next place you want to visit, or next place you're planning to go?
I went to Grenada in January, and I want to go back again because I had the best time.
Yeah,
so nice.
Spice Isle.
Oh, God.
Spice.
Amazing.
The Spice Isle. It's amazing.
Yeah.
That's great. And what are some of your favorite ways to connect? Obviously, you're not allowed to say through food because we know that is right on top of your list. So what are some of your other favorite ways to connect?
Does drink count if it's not?
I'm going to allow it. Tell us a bit.
Drink and good conversation, because I can chat all day. So yeah.
That sounds good to me. Drink and good conversation. So just a couple of wrap-up questions. Where can people find you? Whether they want to taste your food or whether they just want to follow you on social, where can people find you?
So Instagram at Sakarah, SAKARH_. And I post everything that I'm doing in real time. I don't have a physical space right now, but always doing like pop-ups and different things. So that's the best place at the moment.
Okay, you said Sakarah, Sakarah.
_
The underscore, yes. So that's great. So you can find you there on Instagram, and hopefully I'll follow you. And next time I'll come down to London and see if I can taste some of this amazing food that we've been talking about. That would be awesome. All right. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm so happy to have had this conversation. I love a good conversation about food, about history, about joy, about writing. Like, this is like my jam right here. So I absolutely love it. And I'm really glad that you were able to come on. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
No, it was just a pleasure to come and chat with you. And just big up the Caribbean as always.
Absolutely. And that's great. So thank you so much for joining me, Keshia. Thanks a lot to our listeners. And I'll hear you again on the next episode. Thank you for joining us today. You can find out more about our guests in the show notes below. And don't forget to hit subscribe and share this episode with a friend. Until next time, I send you big love.